It was a quiet morning, the kind that made me feel like everything was exactly where it needed to be. The air smelled of fresh coffee, the kind I had been meaning to switch out for something healthier but never did. The sun filtered through the blinds of my Charlotte condo, cutting soft golden lines across my kitchen counter as I settled into my usual spot, coffee in one hand, my laptop open in front of me. It was my morning ritual, a small slice of peace before the chaos of work took over. Then my email chimed. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, maybe a report from my assistant or an update from my real estate investment firm, where I spent most of my time managing properties across the state. Instead, her name flashed across the screen. Sarah, my wife. Or at least, she had been my wife. The subject line was short, almost casual. Moving on. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before clicking it open. And then, just like that, my world split clean down the middle. The first thing I saw was a photo. Sarah, draped across the shoulders of some kid, her arms wrapped around his waist, grinning like she had just won the lottery. The two of them stood in front of my vacation home, the one I had paid for, the one I had spent years dreaming about. And there they were, smug, comfortable, as if they belonged there, as if I had been nothing more than a stepping stone to their new life. Beneath the photo, a message. The house is mine now. I've already moved in with Jake. My lawyer will send over the divorce papers. Don't bother fighting it. The deed is in my name. That was it. No apologies. No explanations. Just a declaration. I set my coffee down, exhaling slowly. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. If anything, a strange kind of calm settled over me, the kind that came right before a storm. Sarah had always been reckless, impulsive. She liked the idea of winning, but she had never been good at the long game. And this was a childish move. She thought she had backed me into a corner, that I would roll over and let her take what wasn't hers. I stretched my fingers, let them hover over the keyboard for a moment, then typed a single reply. Are you sure about that? I hit send, blocked her number, and finished my coffee. She had just declared war, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs weren't just there. They were flashing in neon, practically screaming at me. But like any man too focused on his work, I had convinced myself that Sarah was just going through a phase, that whatever was making her distant, distracted, and increasingly irritable would pass. Now, sitting in my office, replaying the past few months in my head, I could see it for what it really was. She had been planning this for a long time. It started with the weekend trips to the vacation house. At first, they seemed innocent enough. Sarah had always loved spending time by the lake, and since I was constantly busy managing my real estate investment firm, I figured it was good for her to get away, to clear her head. She claimed she needed the space to be creative for her interior design projects. But then the trips became more frequent. Then they became secretive. She stopped inviting me, brushing off my questions with half-hearted excuses. You wouldn't enjoy it, babe. It's just me relaxing, brainstorming ideas for my next house flip. I let it go. I told myself that after 6 years of marriage, people needed their own space. Then came the late-night phone calls. I would catch glimpses of her sitting on the balcony, hushed whispers into her phone, her voice carrying that forced casual tone of someone who didn't want to be overheard. I asked her about it once. She gave me an exaggerated laugh and rolled her eyes. Relax, Jason. It's just my designer friends. We're brainstorming layouts. She had always been a good liar, but I had been a fool. The real wake-up call should have been the shift in the way she treated me. I still remember the night I told her about a huge investment deal I had closed. I was excited, proud, wanting to share the moment with her. It was a milestone deal, one that would secure us financially for decades. She had barely looked up from her phone. That's great, babe, she had said, her voice flat. No excitement, no pride, no nothing. That was when I should have known. Sarah had stopped seeing my success as ours. She had started treating it as hers. She loved to play the role of the successful investor's wife, the woman who rubbed elbows with the elite at real estate galas, the one who casually mentioned her involvement in my business to anyone who would listen. But the truth? She hadn't lifted a damn finger. Sarah was an interior designer who dabbled in house flipping, and by dabbled, I meant she had picked out throw pillows and wallpaper while I funded the entire operation. Her name was on the projects, but the money? The connections? The actual work? That was all me. The same went for the vacation house. It had been my dream. I had paid for it outright, thinking it would be a place for us to escape the stress of the city, a place where we could build memories. But Sarah had insisted on putting her name on the deed. It's for tax purposes, she had told me. Trust me, it's just a formality. I had agreed, mostly because I hadn't seen a reason to argue. What she didn't know was that before signing anything, I had my lawyer draft documents protecting my investment, because while Sarah liked to play the long game, I had spent years mastering it. And that house? It was mine. She had no idea how wrong she was. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my office ceiling. My hands curled into fists as I thought about that email again, the smug arrogance dripping from every word. She thought she had played me. She thought she had won. But she had made one fatal mistake. She underestimated me. I turned to my computer and logged into my security system. Months ago, I had installed cameras at the vacation home for insurance purposes, ensuring that if anything ever happened to the property, I'd have evidence. At the time, I hadn't realized they would serve an entirely different purpose. I clicked on the live feed, and there they were. Sarah and Jake, her new 23-year-old boyfriend, lounging by the pool, sipping champagne like they were celebrating a victory. Jake had the arrogance of a kid who had never built anything for himself, the kind of smug confidence that came from knowing someone else was footing the bill. He was wearing my bathrobe, drinking my whiskey, living in my house. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. I scrolled back through weeks of footage. Sarah sneaking him in at night. Jake walking around shirtless, driving my car. The two of them hosting private little dinner parties, acting like they had already wiped me from existence. My chest tightened, but not from heartbreak. That wasn't what this was. This was strategy. Sarah had just handed me every piece of evidence I needed to destroy her. The money she had siphoned from our accounts, the property she thought she had stolen, the affair she had so carelessly paraded in front of my cameras. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to send angry texts or drunken voicemails begging for explanations. I was going to be patient, because Sarah had declared war, and she was about to learn that I never lost. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tapping against the desk as I let the reality of what I had just seen settle in. Sarah and her boy toy, Jake, lounging in my vacation home, sipping expensive whiskey they hadn't earned, parading around in what they thought was their new kingdom. It was almost laughable, the way they moved through the house like they had claimed it, like they had already erased me from its walls. I didn't feel sadness. That stage had passed the second I opened her email. What filled me now was something colder, sharper, a focused, simmering rage that wasn't about vengeance for the sake of ego. No, this was about correction, about making sure that Sarah learned exactly who she had tried to play. I turned back to the security footage on my laptop, rewinding to the earliest recordings. I wanted to see how far back this betrayal really went. How long had this been happening under my nose while I was too distracted by work to notice? A month, maybe two. The first few recordings showed Sarah arriving alone, bags in hand, the way she always had when she went on her so-called weekend retreats. Then, the changes started creeping in. First, small things. The way she spent more time outside on the deck, looking at her phone with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Excitement. The kind of look she used to give me. Then, Jake appeared. He didn't start off bold. The first recording of him showed him sneaking in late at night, Sarah waiting at the door, pulling him inside with a giggle, like a damn teenager. From there, they grew bolder. Jake started coming and going freely, moving around the house like he belonged there, wearing my shirts, my cologne, driving my car. It was the kind of arrogance that came from a man who thought he had already won. I paused the footage, staring at the screen, my jaw tightening. They had no idea I had been watching them. But now? Now it was my turn to move. I pushed away from my desk and grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on Daniel's name. My lawyer. My oldest friend. The man who knew how to turn a mistake into an execution. He picked up on the second ring. Jason. What's up? I didn't waste time. I need to make sure Sarah is removed from the vacation house. There was a short pause. You finally kicking her out? Something like that, I said, my voice steady. She thinks she owns it. Sent me an email this morning, flaunting her new boyfriend, telling me the house is hers now. She has no idea I have security footage of them living there like squatters. Daniel let out a slow, amused exhale. She really thinks she pulled this off, huh? She does, I confirmed. But we both know the deed may be in her name, but ownership isn't. Exactly, Daniel said, his voice turning sharp. You paid for that house in full, and we made sure you had the right documents to prove it. Sarah has no legal claim to it. She just thinks she does. And now I want to make sure she finds out the hard way. Daniel chuckled. All right. First things first. I'll start the eviction process. We'll hit her with a formal notice, giving her a week to vacate. If she refuses, we escalate. Perfect, I said. Anything else? I hesitated for a beat, then leaned forward, my voice lowering. She's been draining our accounts. I want to know where the money went. Daniel's tone darkened. How much are we talking? Over 150 grand, I said. Gone. A low whistle. Damn. All right. I'll pull the financial records and see where it went. If she moved it into an offshore account, we might not be able to get it back, but we can use it against her in court. Do it. I'll call you once I have something, Daniel said. I hung up and exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers against my temples. I had spent years building a bulletproof empire, carefully securing every asset, every investment, making sure that no matter what happened, I would never be taken advantage of. And now, Sarah was about to learn what happened when she tried. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and pulled up the security feed one last time before bed. Sarah and Jake were in my living room, stretched out on my couch, watching a movie on my television. Jake had his feet propped up on the coffee table, looking completely at ease, as if he belonged there. Sarah leaned against him, sipping a glass of wine, laughing at something he said. It was almost funny, watching them, knowing what was coming, because by this time next week, they would be homeless. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I had no intention of sending Sarah a warning. She would find out when the papers hit her doorstep, and when she did, I hoped she looked back at this moment, this pathetic, delusional moment of triumph, and realized exactly what she had done. Because in less than 7 days, she was going to lose everything, and I was going to make sure she felt every second of it. The morning after speaking with Daniel, I woke up feeling something I hadn't in a long time, calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from peace, but the kind that settles in right before a battle. The kind that sharpens the mind, focuses the body, makes every move deliberate. I wasn't rushing into this. I wasn't acting out of emotion. I was executing a plan. And Sarah? She had no idea what was coming. I got dressed and made myself a strong cup of coffee, then sat down at my desk to check my financial accounts. I wasn't expecting anything new. I had already caught Sarah siphoning money, but I wanted to see just how deep the damage went. I logged in and scrolled through the transactions, my jaw tightening as the numbers loaded. There it was. $150,000 gone. She hadn't taken it all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, she had done it gradually, transferring smaller amounts over several months, slipping the money into an account I didn't recognize. A name popped up next to one of the transfers. JT Holdings. I frowned. That wasn't an offshore bank. It wasn't a foreign account hidden in some tax haven. I typed the name into a business registry search and hit enter. And that's when I felt my stomach turn. JT Holdings was registered under one name, Jake Turner. The little boy toy Sarah had left me for wasn't just some random fling. He was the one holding my stolen money. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. That changed things. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was fraud. I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel. He answered after the second ring. Tell me you have good news, he said. I let out a humorless chuckle. That depends on how you define good news. Talk to me. Sarah didn't just take my money. She transferred it into an account under Jake's name. Turns out he has his own little shell company. Daniel was quiet for a beat. That's interesting, isn't it? I said. almost like she wasn't just planning to leave me. She was setting him up with my money. That's not just theft, Jason, Daniel said, his voice taking on a sharp edge. That's financial fraud. We can take legal action. Freeze the accounts. Go after both of them. I smirked. That's exactly what I want to do. Daniel let out a low whistle. All right, let's start with an injunction to freeze the funds. I'll file the paperwork today. We need to move before they realize we're onto them. Good. Do it. One more thing, Daniel said. Eviction papers are going out today. She should get them in the next 24 hours. You want to bet how she reacts? I grinned. Oh, I already know. That evening, I logged into my vacation house security feed and pulled up the camera aimed at the front door. I didn't have to wait long. At 6:45 p.m., a process server arrived. A young guy in a button-up shirt and a leather folder tucked under his arm. He rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Sarah appeared. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, her hair in a messy bun, a glass of wine in one hand. She probably thought it was a package delivery or one of her new furniture pieces arriving. But when the guy handed her the papers, her entire expression changed. She read the first few lines, and I saw it. The exact moment reality hit her. Her face blanched. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was struggling to form a sentence. Then, she looked up, furious. She said something too quiet for the cameras to catch, then slammed the door in his face. I smirked, sipping my bourbon. There it was. The panic. She had just realized she was standing in a house that wasn't hers. And soon, she wouldn't be standing in it at all. The next morning, Sarah tried to call me. I let it ring. Then, she sent an email. Subject, let's be adults about this. I opened it, already knowing what it would say. Jason, you don't have to do this. I know you're hurt, but we don't have to be cruel to each other. I just want what's fair. Let's talk. Fair. She had the audacity to use that word after stealing my money, sleeping in my house with her new boy, and then trying to push me out like I was nothing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I forwarded the email to Daniel with a single message. Make sure the financial freeze is locked in today. By noon, the accounts were frozen. Jake wouldn't be able to access a single dollar. I had just cut off their entire lifeline. That night, Sarah called again. This time, I answered. The moment she heard my voice, she launched into a speech. Jason, you can't do this. That money was mine, I cut in. It was mine, Sarah. Every dollar. Every cent. And now, you don't have access to it. Neither does your little boyfriend. She sputtered. You can't. This is illegal, Jason. I chuckled. Illegal? You stole from me, Sarah. You committed financial fraud. You transferred my money into another man's account. Do you know what the penalty is for that? She went silent. You should look it up, I said. You might be seeing a courtroom sooner than you think. Jason, please, she said, her voice dropping. It wasn't like that. I hung up because I didn't care anymore. Sarah had spent months preparing for this. She had built a plan, convinced herself she had won before the game even started. But now, she was watching her entire future crumble in real time. And I wasn't done yet. That night, I checked the security feed one last time. Jake was pacing around the living room, his hands in his hair, yelling at Sarah. She was on the couch, head in her hands. They were falling apart. And this was only the beginning, because soon, they wouldn't just be broke. They'd be homeless. The storm had officially begun. Sarah just didn't know how bad it was going to get. By the next morning, her accounts were completely frozen. No access to the money she stole. No way to fund her new life with Jake. She had played the long game, carefully siphoning my money into his name, thinking she was untouchable. Now, she was waking up to the reality that she had nothing. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee as I waited for the inevitable. It didn't take long. My phone rang. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. By the fourth call, I decided to pick up. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the exact moment she realized how badly she had miscalculated. I answered, keeping my voice calm. Hello? Jason, what the hell have you done? I smirked, leaning back in my chair. Morning to you too, Sarah. Sleep well? You froze my accounts, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? I let out a slow breath, feigning confusion. What I've done? No, Sarah. This is about what you did. You stole from me. You funneled money into your boy toys account like I wouldn't notice. And now? You're facing the consequences. Her breath hitched. It wasn't, Jason, listen. I know you're mad, but I didn't steal. You didn't? I interrupted. Then explain how $150,000 ended up in Jake's name. Explain why I have paperwork tying you to fraudulent transactions. Because I have everything, Sarah. Every single receipt. Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the desperate search for an excuse that would get her out of this. Jason, we can fix this, she said finally, her voice softer, calculated. Let's just talk. Face to face. We were married for 6 years. That has to mean something. I smiled. There it was. The desperation. Sarah, I said evenly. The only thing that means something to me is watching you get exactly what you deserve. Then I hung up. By noon, Daniel called with an update. The court order is finalized, he said. Sarah and Jake can't touch those funds. Legally, it's frozen until we go to trial. But based on the fraud evidence, it won't even make it that far. The judge will award the money back to you. I grinned. So they're broke? Beyond broke, Daniel confirmed. And that's not even the best part. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, Daniel chuckled. Sarah's eviction notice was served this morning. She has 7 days to vacate. If she refuses, we file for forced removal. I let out a slow breath, nodding. Good. Keep me posted. Will do. But Jason? Yeah, this is going to get ugly. I smirked. It already is. That night, I logged into the security feed at the vacation house. Sarah and Jake were in full meltdown mode. Jake was pacing the living room, yelling, his hands in his hair. Sarah sat on the couch, her head buried in her hands. I turned up the volume. How the hell did this happen, Sarah? Jake snapped. You told me the money was safe. I thought it was. She shot back. I didn't think he'd. She stopped, rubbing her temples. God, I don't know. Jason was never supposed to fight me on this. Jake let out a humorless laugh. Well, newsflash. He did. And now we're screwed. I chuckled to myself. They had underestimated me. Now, they were drowning. And soon, they'd be homeless. The next morning, I woke up to another email from Sarah. Subject, please, let's be civil. I rolled my eyes and opened it. Jason, I know we've had our differences, but this doesn't have to be like this. I understand you're upset, but I don't deserve to be punished like this. Can we at least talk? Please? Sarah. I smirked. Punished? This wasn't punishment. This was justice. I forwarded the email to Daniel with a note. No response. Keep the eviction process moving. 2 days later, I got another update. Jake had tried to withdraw funds from his account, only to realize it had been frozen. The idiot actually walked into his bank and caused a scene, demanding answers. The manager had called security on him. Sarah, on the other hand, had spent the day calling realtors, trying to find a new place to live. No one would approve her, because thanks to Daniel, her credit had been flagged for financial fraud. That evening, I got a text from Daniel. She's trying to contact the judge to delay the eviction. She's out of options. I laughed, shaking my head. And what's the judge saying? Daniel's reply was simple. Denied. 7 days. No extensions. Sarah had run out of moves. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. And soon, she would have nothing. 3 days later, I checked the security feed again. Sarah was packing. Jake was gone. I raised an eyebrow, scrolling through the footage. He had left the night before, suitcase in hand, slamming the door behind him. I checked my email. A forwarded message from Daniel. Subject, Jake bails. Jason, looks like Jake jumped ship. I had a PI check. He booked a flight to Miami this morning. Looks like he's running. Daniel. I grinned. Jake was smart enough to know when a sinking ship wasn't worth saving. Sarah, on the other hand, she was still standing in the wreckage, hoping for a miracle. The final blow came the day before her eviction deadline. Sarah showed up at my office. She stood in the lobby, looking disheveled, desperate. I watched from behind the glass wall as my assistant told her, calmly, that I wasn't available. Sarah's face twisted. I expected her to scream, to beg. Instead, she turned, walked toward the door, and stopped. Then, without looking back, she left. That was it. The end of Sarah Carter. The woman who had tried to steal my future had just lost hers. And I had one. Sarah had never been one to admit defeat easily. She had always been the kind of person who twisted reality until it suited her, convinced that if she just lied well enough, if she cried at the right moment, if she played the victim perfectly, she could get away with anything. But not this time. This time, she had nothing left to twist. The morning of her final day in my house, I woke up early, poured myself a coffee, and opened my laptop. The security feed from the vacation home was already queued up. I didn't need to watch it. I already knew how this story ended. But there was something satisfying about seeing it unfold in real time. Sarah was standing in the middle of the living room, her suitcases half-packed, her face pale. She moved sluggishly, as if the reality of her situation had only just started to settle in. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was her life unraveling. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts, her fingers twitching slightly as she hovered over a name. Then, as if she had no other choice, she called me. I stared at the ringing screen, debating whether I should pick up. Then, finally, I answered. "Jason," she said, her voice small. I don't know what to do." I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of coffee. "That's not my problem, Sarah." She let out a sharp breath. "You don't have to be like this." "Like what?" I asked calmly. "Like someone who refuses to be taken advantage of? Like someone who wants to see me suffer," she snapped. "I get it, Jason. I do. I hurt you. But what do you want from me? To see me homeless? Is that what this is?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "Sarah, you chose this. You wanted this. You wanted a life without me? Congratulations. You got it." She went silent. "You have until the end of the day to get out of my house," I said, my voice firm. "If you're still there by midnight, the police will remove you. Your choice." She let out a quiet, broken laugh. "You really hate me now, don't you?" I didn't hesitate. "I feel nothing for you, Sarah. Nothing at all." Then I hung up. At 5 p.m., I checked the security feed again. Sarah had moved to the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. She looked different now. Not like the woman who had written that smug email. Not like the woman who had flaunted her new life with Jake. That woman had been arrogant. This woman? She looked defeated. But it wasn't my job to feel sorry for her. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. By 8:30 p.m., Sarah had packed what little she could carry. She was on the phone again, but this time, she wasn't calling me. She was calling her friends, her family, anyone who might help her. No one answered. The same people she had once bragged to about leaving me, the same people who cheered her on when she moved in with Jake, they had all disappeared, because Sarah had burned every bridge she ever had. Now, she was stranded, and there was no one left to save her. At 11:45 p.m., she walked out the front door for the last time, a single suitcase in one hand, her phone in the other, her eyes hollow. She turned back once, staring at the house as if she still couldn't believe this was happening. Then, without a word, she walked away. The door locked behind her. It was over. The next morning, Daniel called me. "She's out," he confirmed. "Sheriff's office went by this morning to confirm the eviction." She didn't fight it, just left quietly. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. "Good. You okay?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I am." Because for the first time in a long, long time, I finally felt free. For the next few weeks, Sarah disappeared. No emails, no phone calls, no more desperate attempts to talk. She had no money, no home, no boyfriend. Jake had left town, moving on to whatever easy scam he could find next. The money she had stolen was still frozen, and without a job or credit, she had nothing to fall back on. And me? I was moving on. I spent my mornings running my company, my nights reclaiming my time, my life. I even started traveling again, spending weekends at the vacation house, the way I had always meant to. And every time I sat out on the deck, looking at the view, I would think about how close I had been to losing everything. How close Sarah had come to taking everything I had worked for. But she didn't. She never could. Because in the end, she had played herself. 2 months later, I got one last email from her. Subject, can we talk? I hesitated before opening it. Jason, I know I don't deserve your time. I don't know where else to turn. I lost everything. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but if we could just talk, if you could just give me 5 minutes, I would appreciate it more than you know. Sarah. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because Sarah wasn't my problem anymore. She had made her choices. And now, she had to live with them. That weekend, I returned to the vacation house, opened a bottle of whiskey, and stood on the deck, watching the sun set over the lake. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Sarah. I wasn't thinking about revenge, or betrayal, or what could have been. I was just here, and it felt damn good. The days after Sarah's eviction were eerily quiet. Not in a bad way. Not in a way that made me feel lonely or regretful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a long, exhausting storm. The kind where you finally step outside, breathe in the fresh air, and realize you survived. She was gone. Her calls had stopped. Her emails had dried up. And, for the first time in years, my life belonged to me again. I wasn't spending my days watching for warning signs, second-guessing her words, wondering if she was lying, if she was scheming. That weight was gone. And in its place, freedom. Real, undeniable, unapologetic freedom. I poured myself a cup of coffee, standing at my kitchen counter, staring out at the city skyline. I had lived in Charlotte for over a decade, but I was seeing it differently now. This wasn't our city anymore. This wasn't our home. It was mine. And that realization? It felt better than I ever thought it would. Daniel called me later that morning, his tone casual. How's life as a free man? I smirked, taking a sip of coffee. Quieter. Better. He chuckled. Figured as much. Thought I'd give you a quick update. Sarah's been trying to fight the financial freeze, but the judge already ruled against her. She's not getting a dime. I leaned back in my chair, nodding. Good. She's also been couch surfing, Daniel added. Tried to rent an apartment downtown, but with her credit flagged, no one's biting. Looks like she's out of options. I didn't feel anything when he said it. Not pity, not satisfaction, just acceptance. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Thanks for the update, I said, setting my coffee down. Anything else? Daniel hesitated. Yeah, actually, he said. There's something you should know. I frowned. What? Jake's back. I blinked, caught off guard. Back? You mean in Charlotte? Yeah, Daniel said. And not just that, he's been asking around about you. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders. Why? Word is, he's pissed. He lost all that money, and now he's blaming you for it. I snorted. Blaming me? For getting caught stealing? Yeah, Daniel said dryly. Because that makes sense. I sighed, shaking my head. What's he doing now? Not much, Daniel said. Just talking. Running his mouth at bars, making threats he's too stupid to follow through on. But I thought you should know. I exhaled, my jaw tightening. Jake was nothing more than a cockroach scrambling after crumbs, hoping to find some way to recover from his own failure. And as much as I wanted to ignore him, I knew better. Because men like Jake? They got reckless when they had nothing left to lose. That evening, I went to O'Malley's, a bar I hadn't been to in months. It was one of those places where everyone knew everyone, a dimly lit spot where business deals were made over whiskey, where old money brushed shoulders with new. And apparently, it was where Jake had been running his mouth. I stepped inside, scanning the crowd, my eyes landing on him instantly. He was sitting at the bar, hunched over a drink, looking nothing like the cocky kid who had once strutted around my house. He looked wrecked, disheveled, angry, and when he looked up and saw me, his entire body tensed. For a second, he hesitated, as if debating whether to make a scene. Then, Against his better judgment, he got up and walked toward me. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching as he closed the distance between us, his hands clenched at his sides. "Jason," he said, his voice tight. I raised an eyebrow. "Jake." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his messy hair. "I want my money back." I almost laughed. Almost. "Your money?" I asked, tilting my head. "You mean my money?" Jake's jaw clenched. "Sarah gave it to me." I smirked. "That's funny, because legally, it was never hers to give." Jake took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You ruined my life." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "No, Jake. You ruined your own life. You saw an easy score, and you got sloppy. And now, you have nothing." His nostrils flared. "I could still take you down." I chuckled. "How? By whining at a bar? By making empty threats?" I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "You don't have the power to take down anyone. Not me. Not anyone else. You're a joke, Jake. And deep down, you know it." His face flushed red. His hands twitched, like he was debating whether to throw a punch. I almost hoped he would, because, unlike him, I knew how to fight. But after a few seconds, he exhaled sharply, stepping back. "You'll regret this," he muttered. I just smiled. "Get in line." And with that, I turned and walked away. Jake didn't follow, because he knew the truth. He had already lost. I went home that night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sarah was gone. Jake was nothing more than a ghost of a bad decision. And me? I was finally free. 1 week later, I put the vacation house on the market. Not because I needed the money. Not because I wanted to forget. But because that house was never meant to be a battleground. It was meant to be an escape, a place of peace. And after everything, I was ready for something new. So I sold it. Bought a new place. One that Sarah had never stepped foot in. One that was entirely, undeniably mine. And as I stood on the deck of my new home, a whiskey in my hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking backward. I was looking forward. And the future? It had never looked better. 2 months had passed since I had wiped Sarah from my life. And with each passing day, I felt lighter. There were no more calls, no more desperate emails, no more pathetic attempts to salvage what she had willingly destroyed. She had taken her shot, thought she had played me, but in the end, she had been the one left in ruins. I had sold the vacation house, moved into a sleek, modern penthouse that had zero history attached to her. This was my fresh start, and I was finally living. I poured myself a drink, stepping onto my balcony, the city skyline stretching before me. Charlotte had always been my home, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it belonged to us. It belonged to me. I wasn't the man Sarah had tried to manipulate anymore. That version of me died the moment she walked out. Now, I was rebuilt, sharper, smarter, unforgiving. I had learned my lesson, and I wasn't about to let anyone take advantage of me again. That weekend, I found myself at an exclusive business event, one of those invite-only gatherings where real estate moguls, tech investors, and CEOs exchanged handshakes over expensive scotch. It was the kind of room where deals worth millions were made in hushed conversations, the kind of place I belonged. But tonight was different. Because as I moved through the crowd, nodding to familiar faces, I saw her. Not Sarah, Emily Donovan, the wife, now ex-wife, of Richard Donovan, my former business rival. She had been married to the man who had tried to undermine my company for years. The man who had worked with Sarah to try and sabotage me. And now, she was standing across the room, sipping a glass of wine, watching me. I raised an eyebrow, curious. Emily had always been an enigma in our circle. Smart, ruthless, untouchable. She had stayed married to Richard for years, despite the whispers, despite the rumors of his infidelities, his underhanded deals, his manipulations. But now she was divorced. Now, she was free. And judging by the way she was looking at me, she had something to say. I made my way over, my drink in hand, stopping just close enough to see the flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Jason Carter," she said smoothly, tilting her head. "I was wondering if you'd show up tonight." I smirked. You were looking for me? Something like that, she admitted, taking a sip of her wine. Word around town is that you single-handedly dismantled my ex-husband's best scheme, that you took him down without even breaking a sweat. I chuckled. Richard was never as smart as he thought he was. Her lips curved. No, he wasn't. I studied her for a moment. Emily wasn't like Sarah. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't impulsive. She was calculated, precise. And the fact that she was standing here, talking to me, seeking me out, that meant something. So tell me, I said, leaning in slightly, why are you really here? She smiled, swirling the wine in her glass. Because I like to keep my eye on the men who know how to win. I raised an eyebrow. And I think you and I could be very useful to each other, she murmured. Business-wise, of course. Of course, I echoed, smirking. But we both knew that wasn't the only thing she was implying. This was a woman who saw an opportunity and seized it. And right now, I was her opportunity. The question was, did I want to take the risk? The rest of the night passed in a blur of conversations, introductions, and high-stakes networking. Emily and I kept circling each other, exchanging sharp glances, unspoken challenges. She was testing me, and I was letting her. By the time the event started winding down, she had slipped me her number, her voice low as she said, "Think about it." And I did, because Emily wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a player. And if I was going to step into this new phase of my life, into a world where I was no longer just reacting, but controlling, I needed to be surrounded by people who understood the game, people who knew how to play to win. Emily Donovan? She understood. The next morning, I stared at her number on my phone, debating. I could ignore it, walk away, keep my life as clean and uncomplicated as I had made it, or I could see where this led. I exhaled. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I sent her a text. Let's talk. Her reply came almost instantly. Tonight. My place. 8 p.m. I smirked. Emily Donovan didn't waste time. And neither did I. That evening, I found myself standing outside her penthouse, my hands in my pockets, my mind sharp. I wasn't here to be reckless. I wasn't here to make mistakes. I was here because I was curious. Emily opened the door, her expression unreadable. You showed up, she said, stepping aside. I walked in, glancing around. Her place was impressive, modern, cold, the kind of home owned by someone who had learned to never let emotions cloud judgment.